Beyond the Gates spoilers, Anita had always believed that the most terrifying moments in life arrived suddenly, with noise and violence, but nothing in her past prepared her for the slow, grinding horror of watching her own strength dissolve day by day. In recent weeks, her world had narrowed into a relentless sequence of medical appointments, whispered diagnoses, and carefully controlled optimism that fooled no one, least of all herself. The cancer diagnosis alone had been enough to shake the foundation of her identity. But it came paired with another cruel revelation. Her daughter carried the BRCA gene, a silent inheritance that felt like a curse passed down through blood rather than choice. The knowledge weighed on Anita with a unique cruelty. Because her suffering no longer felt contained within her own body, it radiated outward, threatening the future of someone she loved more than herself. Beginning chemotherapy marked a new chapter of fear, one defined not by speculation, but by physical reality. The nausea, the dizziness, the exhaustion that seeped into her bones after the first treatment were more violent than she had anticipated, and when she collapsed afterward, it felt less like a medical emergency and more like a symbolic surrender. Her body had made a decision without consulting her pride, and the message was unmistakable. She was no longer in control. Compounding the physical trauma was the suffocating protectiveness of her husband, whose fear manifested as constant supervision, rigid rules, and an unspoken expectation that Anita would remain calm and compliant for his sake. While his intentions were rooted in love, his behavior stripped her of agency at a moment when autonomy was the only thing she had left. Every gentle insistence, every watchful glance, reminded her that she was now perceived as fragile, a person who needed managing rather than trusting. The emotional fatigue of navigating his anxiety sometimes felt heavier than the illness itself, because it denied her the dignity of confronting her pain on her own terms. By the time Friday arrived, Anita was already stretched thin, suspended in a state of quiet endurance that demanded more strength than she could realistically summon. The weekly spoilers hint that her endurance is about to be tested again, and the phrase "a devastating loss" hovers ominously over her storyline. It does not need to be a death to qualify as catastrophic. In fact, the most brutal losses are often the ones others dismiss as superficial. Hair loss, a common side effect of chemotherapy, carries a symbolic violence that outsiders rarely understand. For Anita, the possibility of watching clumps of hair fall away could feel like the final erasure of the woman she once recognized in the mirror. Hair is identity, femininity, control, and privacy all at once, and losing it in such a public, unavoidable way would expose her illness to the world before she is emotionally prepared to acknowledge it herself. If this is the loss she faces, it will not merely wound her vanity. It will confront her with the undeniable visibility of her disease, forcing her to grieve the version of herself that existed before hospitals and prognosis charts dictated her future. And if the loss is something else entirely, something even more severe, it will land on a woman already bouncing at the edge of emotional collapse, making the question not how much more she can endure, but whether endurance itself is still possible. While Anita's suffering unfolds in silence and restraint, Ava's troubles erupt through confrontation and consequence. Her clash with Kat has left ripples that extend far beyond their immediate conflict, pulling Isaiah into the center of a situation he neither initiated nor fully understands. Ava's emotions are raw, sharpened by the knowledge that her actions, however justified in her own mind, have complicated her relationship with someone whose opinion she values deeply. Isaiah is now forced to reassess not only Ava's choices, but her judgment, and the tension between them grows heavier with each unspoken accusation. Eva finds herself trapped between self-defense and regret, unable to fully explain herself without reopening wounds she hoped would heal on their own. The aftermath of the confrontation exposes a fault line in her character, the part of her that acts on instinct versus the part that craves stability and trust, with Kat standing as a reminder of unresolved hostility, and Isaiah representing the cost of emotional fallout. Eva must navigate a situation where every move risks alienation, and every silence feels like an admission of guilt. Parallel to these emotional crises is HAYLEY's simmering frustration, driven not by grief or misunderstanding, but by the failure of her own carefully calculated cruelty. Her plan to kill Bill has stalled in a way that feels almost insulting, as though fate itself is mocking her patience. She has been administering small doses of a toxic mixture, convinced that subtlety would allow her to avoid suspicion. Yet the plan has yielded nothing beyond one frightening moment that ultimately led nowhere. The irony is bitter. Her meticulous efforts are undermined by something as trivial as Bill's personal taste. By choosing herbal tea, a drink he openly dislikes and actively avoids, HAYLEY has sabotaged her own scheme without fully realizing it. Each untouched cup becomes a symbol of wasted intent, each failed attempt deepening her resentment and urgency. HAYLEY's frustration escalates as she becomes aware that time may not be on her side. Bill's recent doctor's appointment introduces an unexpected complication, with strange test results raising concerns that extend beyond her original plan. The weekly preview suggests that Madison is beginning to connect the dots, her medical instincts alerting her to inconsistencies in Bill's health. That cannot be easily dismissed. Madison's involvement represents a serious threat to HAYLEY's intentions because, unlike others, Madison is trained to notice patterns, to question what does not make sense. If she uncovers the truth behind Bill's condition, the entire structure of HAYLEY's plan could collapse, exposing her not as a patient conspirator, but as a desperate woman whose need for control has crossed into obsession. Together, these storylines form a powerful tapestry of suffering, consequence, and moral decay. Anita's horror stems from a loss she never chose. Ava's conflict arises from emotional miscalculation, and HAYLEY's disappointment is born of her own malice failing to bear fruit. Each woman is trapped in a different kind of crisis, yet all are united by the same underlying truth. The illusion of control is fragile, and when it shatters, what remains is raw vulnerability. As Beyond the Gates moves forward, the question is not simply what each character will lose next, but how much of themselves they can afford to sacrifice before there is nothing left to protect. The confrontation between Eva and Kat does not end when their voices fall silent. Instead, it follows Eva home, lingering in the air like unfinished business, and seeping into her relationship with Isaiah in subtle but destabilizing ways. On the surface, Isaiah's position seems clear. He is with Eva emotionally and physically, and his distance from Kat over time has naturally shaped his perception. He sees the conflict through Eva's lens, filtered by loyalty and affection, and that alone already tilts the balance in her favor. Yet the problem is not what he believes he knows, but what he has never fully understood about the long history between Eva and Kat. Their relationship is layered with unresolved tension, competition, old wounds, and misunderstandings that cannot be reduced to a single argument or a single villain. Isaiah's perspective is inherently incomplete, shaped by proximity rather than truth, and that incompleteness becomes dangerous the moment he is forced to confront evidence. That does not align with Ava's version of events. If Isaiah witnesses the confrontation firsthand, the impact could be immediate and irreversible. Body language, tone, and instinctive reactions often reveal more than words ever could. And seeing Eva in a heightened emotional state might expose a side of her he has never encountered before. Even if he only hears about the argument secondhand, there is still the risk that something Eva says, perhaps casually or defensively, will trigger his unease. A single sentence, spoken in frustration or anger, could suggest motivations she never intended to confess, raising questions about her role in perpetuating the conflict rather than merely enduring it. Isaiah is not blind, and while he may want to protect Eva, he is also capable of recognizing patterns. If her explanation carries contradictions or an undercurrent of resentment that feels too deep to be circumstantial, it could force him to reconsider the simplicity of the narrative he has accepted so far. In that moment, the issue is no longer Kat versus Eva, but honesty versus comfort. And Isaiah may find himself questioning not just Ava's actions, but the emotional foundation of their relationship as this personal tension unfolds. The situation surrounding Chelsea and Madison adds another layer of emotional instability. Within the Dupree orbit, their most recent conversation left more questions than answers, and the ambiguity surrounding their relationship feels intentional rather than accidental. Chelsea's mention of marriage, delivered in a way that struck Madison as careless or even manipulative, has clearly left a mark. Marriage, for Madison, is not a rhetorical device or a bargaining chip. It is a serious commitment that demands sincerity and respect. Hearing Chelsea invoke it so lightly forces Madison to confront the possibility that their relationship exists on fundamentally different emotional wavelengths. The moment exposes a fracture that may have been forming quietly for some time, now impossible to ignore. Friday's spoilers suggest that Chelsea is preparing to make a bold move, one that could redefine not only her relationship with Madison, but her sense of self. The ambiguity of her intention is what makes it compelling. This move could be an attempt at reconciliation, a grand gesture designed to prove that her feelings are real, and that her earlier words were poorly chosen rather than insincere. Alternatively, it could signal a decisive break, a step toward independence that acknowledges the relationship has reached a point of no return. Chelsea has always walked a fine line between vulnerability and ambition, and this moment forces her to choose which side will define her next chapter, whether she is fighting to reclaim Madison or to reclaim herself. The outcome will likely reshape how she is perceived by everyone around her, including those who have quietly questioned her motives all along. Meanwhile, Nicole's storyline offers a stark contrast, grounded not in conflict, but in deliberate restraint. Having fully moved on from her long and complicated marriage to Ted, Nicole has embraced a new phase of life that prioritizes freedom over obligation. Her relationship with Carlton is genuine, affectionate, and emotionally fulfilling. Yet she is careful to maintain boundaries. Decades of marriage have taught her the cost of losing herself in another person's expectations, and she is determined not to repeat that pattern. Nicole's reluctance to commit is not rooted in fear of intimacy, but in a desire to protect her autonomy at a time when she is rediscovering who she is outside of long-standing roles. Her recent encounter with Dr. Kyle Rollins at Uptown introduces an intriguing shift in her narrative, one that carries both personal and symbolic weight. For Kat, witnessing this side of her mother may be unsettling, even alarming, because it disrupts the familiar image of Nicole as cautious and reserved. Seeing her engage openly, perhaps even flirtatiously, with a medical professional challenges Kat's assumptions about where her mother's boundaries lie. Yet Nicole herself appears energized by the interaction, drawn to Kyle's presence in a way that suggests more than casual interest. The promotional teasers hint that Nicole is on the verge of allowing someone into her bedroom, a decision that carries emotional significance regardless of who that person turns out to be. The question of whether this individual is a cosmetic surgeon or an orthopedic doctor is more than a playful mystery. It reflects Nicole's internal negotiation between self-care and desire. If it is the cosmetic surgeon, the choice may symbolize her reclaiming control over her appearance and identity, an assertion of confidence after years defined by compromise. If it is the orthopedic doctor, the implication shifts toward physical healing and trust, suggesting she is ready to let someone support her in a more intimate, grounded way. Either option underscores the same truth. Nicole is exploring her independence on her own terms, refusing to let societal expectations or past experiences dictate the pace or nature of her choices. Together, these intertwined storylines highlight the fragile balance between perception and reality within. Beyond the gates, Ava's conflict with Kat threatens to destabilize her relationship with Isaiah by exposing truths that loyalty alone cannot suppress. Chelsea's bold move forces a reckoning between love and self-determination, while Nicole's cautious but intentional steps forward challenge the idea that healing must follow a linear path. Each character stands at a crossroads, shaped not only by their decisions, but by how those decisions are interpreted by the people closest to them. In a world where history, emotion, and ambition collide, the most dangerous revelations are not always the loudest ones, but the quiet realizations that change how trust is given, withdrawn, or irrevocably broken.